Welcome to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show!
Hello, everybody. Welcome, my new Instagram buddy, Rita Bliven. We are going to talk about attachment theory, which I think I know what that is. That's when you get super glue on you and you stick your fingers together rather than what you're trying to glue, right? But before we get into that, let's do all the, usual nitty gritty. Where were you born and raised? Where are you at now? That kind of thing.
Sure. So I was born in Bakersfield, California, but I was raised in the rural part of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So my grandparents had a 100-acre farm a little bit outside of Pittsburgh. It was a wonderful way to run around and get all my energy out as a kid. What about you?
Born and raised in Southeast Michigan. And
okay.
Even though I'm not fond of winters, I stay, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so being by Pittsburgh, you know what it's like to be in the pits.
Yes. That's why I moved to North Carolina as soon as I could.
So that's where you are now, North Carolina?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure glad you escaped California.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, my audience knows I can never pass on the lame pun, so I had to pick on people of Pittsburgh, especially since they stole a Stanley Cup from us the one year.
Mm-hmm. One time.
At any rate, indeed, we came across each other through the internet, and I saw you talk about attachment theory in the Bible, and I like. Well, that sounds pretty good. Well, let's temporarily separate the two.
Okay.
And what is attachment theory in general?
Sure. Attachment theory is the belief that every single child needs to form a lasting bond with at least one primary caregiver that's loving, consistent, and responsive. And from that bond, the child gets a blueprint for every other relationship in their lives, as well as a foundation to explore the world and develop who they are as a person. So that first relationship with your primary caregiver is really the building block of your entire life.
I see. That certainly makes sense. And so all those with a nanny, that would right, more attached to the nanny than the mom and dad, perhaps.
Yeah, and it really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a biological relative. It just has to be a primary caregiver that's consistent and responsive and loving. And so it doesn't have to be your mom or your dad. Of course, ideally, there are additional benefits if it's your biological mother or father, but it can just be anybody, really, which is really amazing, because God in his infinite wisdom knew that not every mother and father would be able to do those things. So as long as there's somebody.
And it's obviously bonus and better if both parents are there and really involved. You get that added benefit of
course,
both the genders or the sexes
contributing. Yes.
Yeah. Examples by which, if it's a good, loving family, to understand what indeed then a good, loving family is to go by, because not everybody has that sound, stable family. There can be abusive families, and that's important. Unfortunate, I meant to say. I can't talk today.
That's okay.
But yeah, at least if you have the one stable person, you're saying that can generally help overcome things later in life.
Absolutely. It gives you the building blocks that you need for relationships and development. And even if both parents are good parents, usually one is the primary breadwinner. And so you need that one that's actually nurturing and loving and responsive. That's not just out there trying to lovingly provide for you, but that's there being responsive to your emotional needs.
Yeah, and again, the examples of both parts of reality. There's the you got to make money side to provide, and you've got to have that nurturing side, as you said, to have that good family unit. And so, okay, let's go to attachment theory in the Bible.
So this is really beautiful. You know, attachment, we had perfect attachment with each other and God in the Garden of Eden. So the Bible says that Adam and Eve were naked and knew no shame. They had perfect relationship, and they were able to commune with God face to face before the fall. And this is something that we all lost. We no longer have that perfect connection to God, a perfect connection to others. We have to fight for it. And it's interesting that the first thing that Adam and Eve did when they broke the connection, so let's take sin out of it. We're not even talking about sin. We're just talking about the act of sin broke that perfect connection with God and with each other. And the first thing they did was hide. And so there's an element of attachment theory that says when we have an unhealthy attachment, we're basically hiding from love. Our love receiver has been broken on some level, and we hide from love in one way or another. There's a couple of different ways that people with attachment issues hide from love, but it all started with Adam and Eve and the first sin in the Garden of Eden.
Again, my audience knows I cannot pass any opportunity for a lame pun. You said love receiver. Is that like a shortwave radio?
Yeah, it is. For love in our minds, yes.
Yeah, in a way, right? The brain waves are there. There are waves. If actually, I was going to say, if only we could read each other's minds, but boy, that'd probably be a horrible thing if we could read each other's minds.
It's good to have boundaries. We all have the privacy of our own minds, so it's a good thing.
And till it took a long time for them to repair and humans as a whole to deal with this back and forth. And it's become part of the human psychology and the human nature and the existence or the absence and how to deal with it.
Absolutely. So in complete correction only comes from Jesus Christ. So we all have a form of correcting the bond that we have with God and with others. But the true, deep, eternal correction of that misstep comes through the blood of Jesus. Are we all living in the reality that was originally available to mankind in the Garden of Eden? No. Are we in a much better state than when Adam and Eve first took of the apple? Possibly. That's an individual question. But when broken attachment happens, there are two major responses. One person says, God cannot meet my needs and others cannot meet my needs. So I have to meet my own needs and I can't trust other people. And you can understand how that would affect relationships moving forward. That's considered avoidant attachment. Anxious attachment says, oh my goodness, I definitely need people and God to meet my needs. And so I'm desperate to get my needs met by others, and I have no responsibility to meet them myself. And those people tend to be the clingy types. So both are extreme responses that can get a little unhealthy at times, and sometimes a lot unhealthy. And then there's a third, which is disorganized, which is a combination of the two. But we see attachment play out in the Bible even more so than with Adam and Eve. You know, Joseph is a good example of somebody who probably had.
Thank you. I know I am. No, but I know. Can't resist. Yes, we know who you mean. Not me.
Now, do you like the Joseph Bible story as somebody who shares his namesake?
Well, yeah, I'm part named after Saint Joseph, part that my grandmother on my mother's side was Josephine.
Oh,
So,
okay. I like that. Yeah. So Joseph was separated from his family, but let's go ahead and take it back. His family was already dysfunctional. So Joseph was the favorite, right? That's why he got his dad's multicolored coat, and his brothers hated him. So he wasn't exactly operating in good connection in his family because his dad's favoritism towards him wasn't exactly healthy either, let alone his brother's hatred of him. And so there's not really an indication of a good, healthy, secure attachment within the family there. And then to make it worse, he was sold into slavery. And most theologians believe it was when he was a teenager. So he wasn't fully developed yet he was brutally and dramatically and cruelly separated from his family that was dysfunctional, but yet loved him. And so that's why when we read on in the Joseph story, he names his children Manasseh, I think something like that. And he says, you've helped me to forget the pain of leaving my father's house. And then later, when his brothers come to Egypt to get grain, it says he sees his brothers and he went into private and wept bitterly. Now, we can all say that, if we saw brothers, siblings that sold us into slavery, we'd probably have some emotions about it. But the fact that he was, second in command of Egypt and thriving and doing well, but yet that broken connection still had that big of an effect on him really speaks volumes.
Yeah. Now, to kind of go back a bit, what brought you here? In the notes I have where you said much of your adult life has been spent learning about attachment traumas, and you yourself, it says, survived an international parental kidnapping, but developed disorder as a result. Yeah. Even with my glasses, the print's a little too small,
Yeah.
So
I totally understand.
I mean, that's gotta be tough to talk about, but I take it probably you feel like it's like a calling to be able to help others. You can heal yourself a little by helping others by discussing that, I would take it.
Absolutely. And at this level, it's not painful for me to talk about anymore. 15, 20 years ago, was it painful for me to talk about? Absolutely. But I've walked through so much healing and reconnection that it's not painful for me to talk about. And now I have, to your point, an obligation to try to help others. So you're absolutely right. When I was a baby, my dad separated me from my mother and took me to Mexico for 2 years. And essentially, my mom stole me back and then severed all ties with my dad and his family and changed my name. So that he could never find me again. So my first memories are of being in a new country with a new family that didn't speak my language. That's pretty traumatic for a 3-year-old. Not to mention the trauma of being separated from my mom as a baby and then separated from my father as a 3-year-old. So I definitely had an avoidant attachment style. Back in the 90s, when I learned about it, it was considered a disorder. So I had an avoidant attachment disorder. The medical health community no longer calls it a disorder because it's completely able to be changed. You can improve your attachment style. You can get healthier, and I certainly have.
That's good. Now, have you reattached at all with your father? Have you sought him out at all? Or you're shaking. For those viewing on the video, you can see her shaking her head,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
for the benefit of the transcript and everyone listening on audio, she's shaking her head. Yeah, so go ahead and let us know about that.
So that was a huge part of my healing journey, is that my father did reach out to me when I was about 18 years old. And it wasn't the best meeting, but a few years later, we reconnected again. And then our visits got longer and more meaningful. And I even went back to Mexico. And it was extremely healing for me. It was like going back home, which is extremely odd because I had no conscious memory of being in Mexico. Because I was 3 when my mom took me back to her hometown in the States. And those were my first memories. I don't remember being in Mexico. But our personality is developed during those years. I don't know if you have any children or nieces or nephews, but you can see them at 3 years old. Their little personalities have emerged. Now, are they going to stay exactly the same? No, but you can tell which kids are a little bit more boisterous and which ones are a little bit more shy. And sometimes that changes, but for the most part, some of the characteristics that we see at that age remain throughout life. And so a huge part of my personality had already been developed by the time I was 3. And then I was ripped away from everything familiar. And so although my conscious memory didn't have any memories, my unconscious memory and nervous system did. And so going back to Mexico and reconnecting with my family, but also reconnecting with Mexico was extremely healing for me.
Now I've got the James Taylor song, "Whoa, Mexico." At any rate, yeah, but back to seriousness again.
Mhm.
Now, so when you were indeed kind of brought then into unfamiliar territory and uncertainty, did you get withdrawn? Were you kind of bubbly at 3 that you knew? And
Oh no, I was very, very bubbly, very talkative for a 3-year-old. Even though I was a toddler, I was very fluent in Spanish, and I think it's because my mom is American. I was a little bit of a favorite in Mexico because my dad is one of 11 children, and so you can only imagine how many grandchildren there were. And I was the little bit different one because they're all full-blown Mexican and I was half white, half Mexican. And so I got a lot of attention. And so as any child that gets a lot of attention from a huge, ginormous family, they respond. And so I was a little bit of a entertainer, a little bit of a clown, and very boisterous. And, that was affected through everything that took place.
yeah, so when you were brought here into that new strange environment, did you withdraw a bit?
I did. So not at first. I have memories of being 3 years old and learning phrases because that's usually what people that are in a new country learning new languages. And I remember learning the phrase from commercials, "You're gonna love it." And I remember, and I remember realizing that if I said it at certain times, people laughed and it was funny. And so I was a little bit boisterous, but I do remember being depressed as early as first grade. And I didn't have the words to describe it, but I think deep down I missed my Mexican family. And I felt out of place because it wasn't the family that I had been with. And even though my mom's family is also very big and loving by American standards, she's one of 5. I just always felt out of place. And then I even felt guilty for not feeling their love. Sometimes I felt very alienated, but I felt guilty because they were very loving and fun, and nobody else in my family was struggling with that. It was just me, and I thought inherently it was something with me, that it was something to be ashamed of, that I had so much love but couldn't encounter it.
Yeah, rummaging around in my brain, I vaguely remember the "You're Gonna Love It," but I can't remember what ad that was associated with. Do you remember?
I don't remember which ad. I feel like it was on a lot of ads in the 80s. I feel like it was one of those, trending phrase, what we would call trending phrases now. It's "You're gonna love it," but it definitely caught my attention because it was said in a different tone. That's usually what catches the foreigner's attention, is when something is said in a different tone, when they're submerged in a new language.
And in a way, it became a little bit of a coping response in a pinch, because you could get a reaction by going there and saying that. It could help you out of a little bit of uneasy situation.
Absolutely. And the foreigner is just great at that. I remember focusing on people's lips and repeating back in my head what they said 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And so you learn to pick up on nonverbal cues, which is something that most people that don't have a reason to are able to do. Not very many people are self-aware, and probably even more people are not very aware of others. And so if you can pick up on cues, social cues, you have a little bit of an edge as far as being able to, handle a situation. It's not necessarily a healthy edge. A healthy edge is to be authentic and to be secure in your foundation of love and have a strong sense of identity and be yourself no matter what, no matter how people respond.
Mm-hmm.
But, the foreigner is trying to find their place in this new world. And so it's not about the strong foundation of love and identity all the time. It's about building a new foundation in a new place. And for me, it was quadrupled because I was a toddler that had been taken from my family. And so there was definitely an inclination to have a survival mindset. Even though I was in my mom's family that loved me and I didn't need to survive, it felt like I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You could see that, again, go down the road of the lame puns. I have that as my mechanism too, to just, always try to elicit a smile, because if you can get a smile, even if it's a forced smile of another, it can help you to smile, and that can spread. So when you said social cue, I immediately in my lame wired brain, I like pool cues. Right? Yeah.
That's funny. Do you play pool?
No, actually, I don't. But I used to have a pool table in the basement, was never any good at it. But again, it's just the lame way my brain is wired. But I have had issues with depression over my life. So with a lot of people with that, humor is indeed usually that coping mechanism. And indeed, if but for a minute, if you can make someone else laugh, you can feel better at that moment too. So helping others helps you. So let's go to, I don't really know where to go and how or what to ask on this. So let me just throw an open question of what else do you want to put out there? Where should we take this next?
The most important thing is to evaluate yourself. So a secure attachment is someone who says, I know who I am, and I know that I'm worthy of love, and I know that I am worthy to develop my own opinions about the world around me. And I will be vulnerable enough to put myself out there, but also value myself enough to not put up with an unhealthy form of love. We know from all the divorce rates and all the domestic violence that the majority of people don't fall in that category. So then you have to ask yourself, which category do you fall in? So there's secure attachment, which is what I just described, and then insecure attachment. And that's what I hit on earlier. There are 3 types of insecure or unhealthy attachment. And those are anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Avoidant is actually the most popular. Those are the people that are lone wolves, usually very career focused, don't feel like they need anybody, will break up with their significant other cruelly and without necessarily a real explanation. Sometimes are serial monogamists, but they're afraid of commitment. They always find something to nitpick if things get too serious. The anxious is the exact opposite. Anxious attachment style is afraid of being alone, afraid of being rejected, wants to get their needs met by others, and are the clingy types that we see depicted in movies and pop culture. So we're pretty familiar with that type. And then the third type is disorganized. And those are the people that swing dramatically to avoidant and anxious. And they usually had an additional element of chaos in their upbringing, usually alcoholism. And so they're a little bit more volatile with being clingy and then withdrawing unexpectedly, and can be a little bit more confusing. And so the first thing
a bit bipolar-ish almost.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because so for me, I just thought I was depressed. I just thought I was going to always have clinical depression. As soon as I started healing my attachment, depression just totally went away. And so I do wonder how many people think they're bipolar when really they're just have disorganized attachment. Now, of course, I'm not a medical professional. And if you have a bipolar diagnosis, I wouldn't negate it with disorganized attachment. But if you're self-diagnosing, you might be confused there, because I had anxiety and depression that completely went away when it just faded into the background once I worked on my attachment, because the attachment is everything. The attachment is the basis of your life, the origin of your life, your first relationship with your primary caregiver when you were helpless, when you could not feed yourself, bathe yourself, clothe yourself, or provide for yourself. It is very important. It's very fundamental. It has extreme ripple effects throughout your life. And so I think a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of other symptoms can really be traced back to attachment, and therefore also healed through attachment. So first of all, I would say, try to figure out which camp you're in. And most of the time when I talk to people, they say, I already know which one I am just from listening to you talk. Or I know which one my husband is, or I know which one my mom is. And oh my goodness. So usually it's not too hard to kind of, is that what you're thinking? Do you think you probably know where you fall?
I'm not really thinking about it because I'm concentrating on this conversation, of course. Now, maybe when we're done, I might go down that rabbit hole, because I do indeed have a bit of OCD at times. And once something is in this pea brain, I can't let it go. It could be midnight comes around, I go to bed, and it's like that's stuck in my brain, and now I can't go to sleep till I resolve that, right? But
hopefully you'll sleep well tonight.
No, like you mentioned, like the anxiety and depression kind of was based on a hole, and you were able to figure out how to fill in that hole, which resolved that issue.
Exactly. Because the depression came from, like I said, my love receiver being broken. So not being able to receive love feels like not being loved. So I was loved. I was fought over. My parents fought over me. They took me to different countries to be with me. And I have 10 aunts and uncles on my dad's side and 4 aunts and uncles on my mom's side. Those are pretty big families. I'm extremely loved. I knew my great-grandparents. I have had a lot of love in my life, but I also had avoidant attachment style, which I couldn't receive it. And so we've all known the child who is abused or neglected, who basically feels unloved. They're devastating effects for that child. Well, I was loved, not abused, not neglected, but I felt like I wasn't loved. And so it had devastating effects like depression and anxiety and, low self-esteem, and on and on and on we went. So that is why you want to identify where you are. And then it kind of leads you into a different journey. So if you have avoidant attachment, there usually has to be some sense of returning to your origin. And now it doesn't have to be very literal, like in my case, where I reconnected with my father and went back to Mexico. But it can be just, if you're adopted and you don't know who your biological parents are, even just doing some research to find out what ethnicity you are, and researching, the part of the country that you come from, or, your historical background. There usually has to be some origin reconnection in the avoidant attachment journey. And it's a little different with anxious. Anxious attachment is a lot about behavior modification. So many times the anxious is aware of what's going on. The avoidant is not aware. The avoidant has shut down their emotions. And so they have to go on this journey of revitalizing their emotions. The anxious is very aware that they have needs, and they're very aware that they need to be met. And so they have to engage in some behavior modification to not try to get those needs met by others 100% of the time, but to self-soothe and to learn ways to meet some of their needs and to kind of calm their emotions.
Yeah,
and
tone things down a bit and find that happy medium. Now, you mentioned divorce before, and the immediate thing that entered my mind is today's society, I mean, is a whole lot different and more hectic with so many things going on and everything. Let me grab the phone, right? Everything's right there at our fingertips 24/7. And so I think we've become a lot more selfish, where in the past we understood more relationships required work. There would always be give and take. And now in the me society, it's all, what can I get?
No, you're absolutely right. And it's also very distracted. So the other thing with connection is that you have to be able to focus in. You don't really have a connection with somebody that's looking at their phone and half listening to you and half engaging in what's on their phone. Connection comes with looking people in the eye, hearing what they're saying, processing what they're saying, and giving genuine responses back, or even just genuine feeling back. When we have our nose in the phone, or even if it's not social media, even if it's just the busyness of corporate jobs, or the busyness of raising multiple children, or the busyness of, the pressure to have your kids in every sport and every extracurricular activity, all of a sudden you're distracted. And, how many parents say, I've driven my kid around all day from school to soccer practice, to study with a friend, to this, to that. And it's like, well, did you talk to your child at all today? No, we were too busy. Well, what'd you do in the car? What'd you do in the car on the ride there when it was just the two of you?
Listen to the radio, right?
Listen to the radio. And that's not even a new thing. That's been around forever.
Yeah.
So how much worse is it with all of our additional distractions?
But you're right. All that missed opportunity when you're together in the car. Turn off the radio. If you know where you're going, turn off the GPS so there isn't the turn right at the next corner. You've got that alone and not alone time, together time to get some bonding. It may not be hyper quality, but it can matter. It can matter.
And we're so designed, it's actually kind of interesting. There are some studies that say we don't need as much connection as we might think. So just track with me for a minute. So if you go back.
So presence is enough at times.
And then also we were, as more, in the history of humankind, we had to farm and we had to hunt for food. And so that took a lot of time. And so again, God in his infinite wisdom knew that an hour of deep, intimate, real connection a day would probably be enough for the family unit, AKA sitting down for dinner together. And so that, for a lot of years was sometimes all people would get. They didn't have, the car rides to the soccer games and stuff because it just didn't exist. And so we do need to be intentional, and it does, probably need to be daily, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes I feel like I hear parents say, we haven't connected with our child for a while, so this weekend we're taking them shopping and doing this, and it's going to be like a 6-hour excursion. Well, that's great, but an hour a day would be better. An hour a day would be better than 6 hours every 2 weeks, all day.
Shorter quality as to quantity.
And consistent.
And a consistency. And I'm glad I like that you use the word intentional. Before we wrap things up, I want to apologize to the audience. I expected this to be a very serious topic and conversation. That's why I invited Rita to be here. I apologize if I distracted you all with my, runaway brain and inability to avoid stupid puns in the middle of serious conversations. But Rita, where do you have a website? Where will people reach out to you at? Yes.
Sure. My website is canyonsandfireworks.com. And from there, I have a link to everything. I have a link to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I don't think Twitter's on there yet, but it will be. And of course, anytime.
Twitter? What's that?
I mean X.
Yeah. Got you. Yeah.
X, yeah. We're not Brazil yet, so we can still have X. But there's a link to everything there. And of course, for someone like me, it's really super helpful if you follow me on social media or like and comment on my content. But yes, there will be updates for everything on my website. That's the easiest way.
And I will, of course, put that in the show notes. And that is Canyons and Fireworks, all lumped together, no dashes, canyonsandfireworks.com.
That's it.
All right. Thank you, Rita, for coming
on. Thank you, Joseph.
I'd like to keep my shows short. Every guest I have on, we could go on for probably 8 hours, and then nobody's going to watch or listen. So,
right. Short and sweet.
Exactly. You understand. All right. Yes. Thank you. Take care. God bless.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Last minute throw together segment. You could see if you're looking behind the scenes, I didn't even bother to pull down the green screen. You can see the couch with all the random paperwork and everything. The ugly couch with the random paperwork and stuff on it. I normally pull down the green screen to hide. But at any rate, I was just going to bed. We were joking about my OCD, and she asked, what type am I? Oh, indeed, the lame pun finally came to me, indeed, as I was going to crawl into bed. So just a quick to throw that out there. What type am I? I'm the given up, the don't care anymore type. I'm too old, too slow, too broke for attachments. Ba-dum-bum. All right. You know me if you're a regular. I can't pass on the lame puns. Couldn't pass on that. Thank you all. Take care. God bless.
Thank you for having tuned in for Constitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help.